What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining in for our first episode of our new podcast, Pursuing Passions, where we interview people of many different professions and just let them share their journey of how they got there. Today, we got our good friend from high school, Jake Imig. Jake's a teacher. Why don't you tell us about yourself, Jake?
Well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me. I got to start this off by saying the boys told me who they got coming up next. So I'm the first guy on here, but they got NBA insiders, they got MLB players, and then they throw me in there. So I'm just happy to be on here and just really excited to be here. But I went to Ashwaubenon High School from Green Bay, Wisconsin, and know the boys from there. Good friends with Sam Wisniewski. Shout out Sam Wisniewski, tennis and all those. But man, I'm just really excited to be on here. I ended up going to UW lacrosse. And I'll tell that story a little bit later. I didn't actually go in with the mindset of going in education. I kind of started off thinking I was going to go in business, but we'll get there later. But I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome to have you, man. Let's kind of dive into it right away. When you're going through your experiences in college, what kind of led to you to want to pursue teaching?
Yeah, well, that's funny. Like I said, I first started with the mindset of I wanted to go business. My dad's a small business owner, and everyone I kind of talked to said, hey, it'd be really, really smart for you to go business. Your personality kind of fits that mix. But it wasn't until, it's kind of a funny story. I was late to sign up for classes. I'm not even going to lie about this. I was late to sign up for classes, and Miss Anderson, basically my supervisor, emailed me, say, hey, you got to figure it out. Come down. We got to straighten this out. So I remember I headed down to Cope Basement my end of freshman year, and she sat me down. She's like, we got to lay out classes for sophomore year. And she started laying into me. I mean, that's like the first time I ever met this lady, and she's like, she treated me like I was her grandkid. She was just yelling at me and saying, you got to figure it out. So she said, hey, basically you have to sign up for this gen ed, but it's already full. So we're going to have you take HED 207. And I remember HED 207 because it changed my life. It really did. It was basically a class that was supposed to be like the Phi Ed, but the Phi Ed was all taken. So it was like a online, in-person kind of cohort model where you basically had to learn about the Phi Ed, the different development stages of the body. So I went there, and the lady ended up having us take up basically a volunteer work. And we had to work with kids in the lacrosse area that were a little underprivileged. And I got paired up with a 5'2" second grader. I just remember staring at him. His name was Julius. And I swear to God, they called me up and said, Jake and Julius. And I remember walking over to the boy, and he had the biggest grin on his face. And that kid had more confidence in his big toe than I did in my entire body. And I just ate it up. I loved it.
Nice.
So when we started talking, and basically on the first day I asked him, I said, Julius, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the first thing he told me was, I want to be a construction worker. And, nothing wrong with that. And hope maybe you guys will have someone like that on the podcast. But I just remember when I was in second grade, I wanted to be a president, right? I wanted to be the president. I wanted to be a professional sports athlete. Yeah. So it was really interesting to kind of hear what he was saying. He's like a construction worker. And I had no problem with it, but I was just like, man, I just didn't think that way. And going through the semester, we read books. He was doing multiplication. He was just the smartest kid. And there are two things that really kind of changed the game for me. And it was one time he looked at me and he said, hey, why do I feel smart here but not at school? Oh. And it hit me. It was like, man, this kid's actually smart. And he's got I just looked at him and I just saw gold, right? I just looked at the kid and I'm like, man, this kid's going to be something great. But he didn't feel that way at school. And we have so many great teachers across the country, but in this specific instance, he didn't feel like that. And I just remember, thinking to myself, wow, the words, the encouragement, they matter, right? Because this kid felt like two completely different kids. With me at this place, he felt like he was the star of the show. He could do anything. He was doing multiplication, and second graders don't even know how to add, right? He was doing that. And then at school, he just didn't felt that way. We went on throughout the semester, and we just had a great time. And on the last day, I remember asking him, I said, Julius, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he looked at me dead straight in the eyes, and he said, I want to be a teacher just like you.
Wow.
And I wasn't a teacher yet. But after that moment, it changed the game for me, and I never looked back.
Man, that's awesome, man.
Surreal.
Kind of branching off that point, I'm sure you're going to talk more about this when you actually go into your experience of teaching, but just that concept of someone at a young age having someone that believes in them. Like every student's got potential, and like you said, Julius, like he felt like a genius when he was with you, but when he was in school, whatever, like the system was around him or who the people were around him, he just didn't feel like he was confident enough in that setting. But kind of talk a little bit about, just being that person for students and how important that is.
Yeah, for me, that's really the number one thing. It was funny. I remember being interviewed, and it was a similar question to this along the lines, and we were just having the conversation, the interview, and I said, the number one thing I want to do is help students, give students the confidence and belief that they can do anything, right? That they can legit change the world. And it's funny how I look back on that, and part of it's true, and part of it I kind of learned. I took a little different avenue after my first year. And I think the big thing is I learned that I necessarily can't give the kids confidence, right? It was surprising. Like in the interview, I was so sure on it. Like I can go in there and I can drive confidence into these kids, and I can make them believe and feel and just have them think that they can do anything, right? Mm-hmm. But the more I learned is that you need that, right? You need that positive encouragement throughout. But in reality, they have to see the success themselves. They have to put in the work. And I'm just trying to be a guiding, hand, right? I want to put them in positions to feel successful. I want to equip them with the tools. But at the end of the day, I want them to discover their abilities and their gifts because it's a lot more impactful when they do it instead of me just telling them.
Well said. Well said. So was there anyone in particular, I know you said that you really wanted to pursue teaching after this experience, but was there anyone else who influenced you on your journey? Maybe a teacher you had in high school or a professor you had in college, who played that role of influencing you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to give my dad a shout out here because I know he'll be watching, but he wasn't a teacher, like I said, but him and my mom had a real big impact on me. And I don't know, there's so many teachers, and when I think about it going back, I just remember in high school thinking, man, who has an impact on the youth so much? And right, for me, it was teachers, my parents, and coaches. Mm-hmm. And I was just fortunate enough to have all three. I had great coaches, I had great teachers, and I have two great parents. And I think it was at that point where I'm like, realize, some people don't have all three. Some people don't have one. Mm-hmm. And it was like, man, if I can be one of those people for someone, whether it's a coach, or a teacher, that I can help guide them and put them in the right spot and show them, make them believe that they can do anything, is that I think that'd be pretty special. But my dad always whispers, going back to that point, he says he whispers, and it whispered in my ear when I was a little boy, be a teacher, be a teacher. And no one confirms that. No one confirms that. He just claims that he always kind of, spoke that into existence. But like I said, I just had so many great, teachers throughout. I could list off a bunch of them, Mr. Fisher, you guys know Mr. Fisher.
Shout out Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, shout out Mr. Fisher, right? I had, just so many, Mrs. V, Vanderhogen, Miss G, she was before. Just so many great teachers that I had. But really that idea of, man, I was just fortunate enough to have great teachers, great parents, and great coaches. And not everyone has this. So.
No, that's really great to hear. And it's really inspiring that you're trying to, what people don't have, you're trying to give them that, that experience that they might not have in their life. So, I respect you for that. Bro, go ahead.
Also kind of taking that in another direction, like, man, I love how you're looking at it from the positive perspective. Like, I had these experiences, I was blessed with this, and I want to give that to others. But also, looking on the flip side of that, was there ever a teacher, obviously we're not going to call out names or anything, but was there ever a teacher you had that made you think like, man, like,
oh yeah,
I would do it different,
oh yeah, and like I said, no names, but it wasn't in high school, so don't worry about it. If you're at Schwab now, you're listening to this, you're exiting it out real quick. No, but it was my accounting professor in college, and you know what? If I remembered his name, I would say it, but I don't even remember it. But it was, man, he just he kind of belittled people. It was kind of the opposite of what everything I was trying to do. He didn't make people really feel safe in the classroom. Just in terms of, calling them out and really didn't expected stuff of people when they weren't prepared. Right. And I think that was something that I didn't like, but man, yeah, there was one, the accounting 221, baby, accounting 221 after that. And I'm like, see you later. I never knew one guy could just propel me away from a whole field, but forget that. I ain't going to be at a desk, be an accountant.
I've heard stories about this. I don't know if I saw it on Twitter or somewhere. I've seen
God,
it.
you probably did, man. You probably did. God, that guy.
Man, that's too funny, man. Yeah, go ahead.
Just going off of that. So when you decided to pursue teaching, was there like any criticism you faced from anyone or any negativity that you saw that maybe people were driving you? I know like some individuals said maybe go the business route. Was there anyone that kind of told you to try something else? Teaching wasn't for you?
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much criticism as exactly what you said. You're like, are you sure? Mm-hmm. Like, you sure this is right? Yeah. Right. And the big one was people, whether it was, certain family members or it was even teachers, right? I'd come back to Ashwaubenon and I'd talk to teachers and they'd be like, well, you sure? Right. I mean, hey, we love our jobs. It wasn't about that. It was just like they felt like my skill set maybe could really excel in that other area. Okay. But then I got thinking about it, you guys, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is that I just thought about teaching and I said, I was thinking teaching is like sales. It really is, but the only difference is when you're teaching, you're selling to a lot of people that necessarily don't want to be there. You're selling to people that don't want to be there. You got Timmy in class thinking about how he's going to ask Anna out to the prom, and you're teaching algebra 2. Yeah. And you're teaching algebra 2. You're teaching slope. You think Timmy cares about that? Heck no. And then in my class, you got, in the middle school, you got Jada, and all she's thinking about is Fortnite and TikTok. And, you're trying to get the message across. And, and even on a more serious note, these are all the things that are going through our kids' heads. And, there's multiple kids in my class, right, that have to take care of their family, right? When they get back there, Carter or so-and-so is thinking about how they're going to feed their 6 brothers and sisters when they get home. And, I think the elite teachers are the best salesmen, right? They can be able to bring these people back. They can get them buy what they're selling, especially when they don't want to be there, right? It's just taking people and making them be in the present and also dealing with those things in their head at another time.
Yeah, man, I think, like you're saying, you're asking what we think about that. Dude, I 100% agree with you because you have such a diverse audience. And like you said, your audience is almost all the time not interested in what you're selling them. And you still got to make them accept it. And you still got to make them good at it, And I think just that to be able to do that, first of all, just see the energy you give off and just seeing how passionate you are about your job. I see on Facebook, you're putting all these posts about different experiences and stories I'm sure you're going to share with us too. Looking forward to that. But it seems like, man, you are meant for this. And just understanding, everyone's coming from a different place. How many times did I see a teacher that it seems like, their class is the only thing that matters in the world. And there's nothing going on behind the scenes. Everyone's coming from the same place. Like we're all on different playing fields, We're all dealt different different hand of cards. And I think you can talk about that too, just having that understanding that, your students are coming from different places. And someone's going to be struggling with something. Well, someone might be taking something really easily. That doesn't mean one's deficient and one's better than the other. It's just, maybe you got to change it up with how you deal with each individual. Mm-hmm. So kind of, good. Let me just shed some light on that.
I like what you were saying too about how you view students, right? And another thing was going back to that was my experience in school. The reason why I think I had going back to school, I had a decent, I got pretty good grades, didn't get much in trouble, but I think it goes back to pre-K. Okay, now hear me out here. So I'm a June birthday, June 13th, and after pre-K went up, my pre-K teacher went up to my parents and said, "Hey, are you going to be moving Jake on to kindergarten?" And they kind of took offense to it a little bit, like, what is my son, a dummy? And obviously, if you saw my ACT scores, you might think I am. But, they were like, why? And she's like, well, basically, he's either going to be, since he's a June birthday, he's going to be super young or he's going to be pretty old. right? So he's going to be on one of the spectrum. So you can either hold him back, and he can be an old kind of a leader in the classroom, or you can send him on and he can be very young. So my parents ended up deciding to hold me back. So, and I think we got to be careful, right? When you talk about labeling students and kind of putting students in a box, right? Because here comes Jake Imig, a year older, coming into the same pre-K classroom with a whole new different kids, and the teacher and the kids, they think I'm some genius because I read Cat in the Hat 127 times. I read the same book over and over, and then you got, Susie grabbing the book and starting from the back and flipping it around. She doesn't know how to touch a book, but I read Cat in the Hat 127 times, so I'm good. So I think we got to be careful for that, and just being able to, put kids in a box and that preconceived notions of when I get a kid into my class and you hear stuff about them from past years. I really think you got to be careful because the environment is so huge. And I just think that, you've got to give every kid a fresh start.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, school's the one spot where, kids are can separate from the outside world, whether if there are things going on at home or they're facing some negative issues in their life. And like the teacher can be that light to inspire them and really help them out through those tough times. So I think that's something that's, you can't really get in anything but teaching.
Well, speaking of that, it was crazy. I brought my little group of kids into a circle one time when we were just kind of practice being vulnerable with each other and just really kind of opening up. And if anything's on there, and again, you don't have to speak it if you don't feel it, but I was sharing a concern or a hardship that was going on in my life, and just kind of opening up, trying to build that trust and that vulnerability in the classroom. And the things kids sharing to me, man, it's crazy. One of my students, he lived in Dallas, Texas before. And him, his mom, his dad, and his mom's friend lived in the back of his dad's truck for 9 months, right? Can you imagine how hot that would be in Texas, just living in the back of the bed of the truck? They're all sleeping in the bed of the truck. And then I got another student with their mom and 8 brothers and sisters living in, something about the size of a bedroom, right? I mean, it's just crazy. And I think it's not always easy, right? Because I can't necessarily relate to that on a personal experience level. I told you that I had great parents, great teachers, great coaches. But I think it's that understanding of taking a step back, listening, being empathetic, and understanding what they're going through as best you can. And just kind of being that communication barrier and going and just listening. I've had to work on that. You guys know I'm a talker, as you can tell right now. I'm a talker. But this first year in teaching, it's really helped me take a step back and just listen. And when kids feel heard, man, it's a special thing. The trust really, really begins to form.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I think, I'm like, we're just dying to hear these stories you got. I know you sent me that video. You got these notes taken up. I'm waiting to hear those, man. But before we get into that, I think let's start off with some of the negative stereotypes of your profession. Every field's got stereotypes, and I feel like, man, stereotypes really just put blocks on people's eyes, right?
Right.
It makes them think like, that's not a field I should even look at because I hear this about that, or so-and-so said that about that, and they don't even give it a second chance. So address some of the negative stereotypes you feel like your field has, and I want you to break those stereotypes with the stories and like experiences that you've had.
Yeah, I think one of the first stereotypes is that schools look the same way that they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I think that's a big problem because the people that are telling the stories of schools aren't in schools anymore. And a education leader, Joe Sanfilippo, that are good friends with he always talks about the people that are telling schools are the ones still upset that they didn't get a second chicken sandwich at lunch. And those are the people that's still ripping on schools, right? And I mean, I could go on and on about the special things that are happening in school. Like I had just so many cool things. I mean, the science department, the stuff that they're doing with the experiments, and you guys know Conrad, we mentioned his name before. All those guys in the science department, social studies, math. Math isn't just reading out of a textbook, right? You're getting in groups, you're collaborating. We got kids in the tech ed developing apps. I mean, I don't remember maybe in middle school, but I wasn't developing apps. I don't know about you guys, but I'm it has changed. Like when my kid comes to me and he's showing me how to do this, and I'm like, you're trying to make Flappy Bird or Angry Bird or whatever that's called. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I mean, God. So I think the thing is we got to be careful about, schools just don't look the same way that a lot of people say they do. I remember seeing a picture about how schools looked 100 years ago and how they look now, and they're all in desks. And don't get me wrong, there are some classrooms that are like that, but there's so many, different classroom feels, right? Like I'm going into classrooms a lot to be with my kids if they're having a rough day or just to check in on them. And you got teachers with comfy chairs, you got bouncy balls, you got lights. Like they're just trying to really create this environment of like a Starbucks feel, right? Like when you go into Starbucks, it's comfortable, it's relaxed. And I just hope that people don't think schools aren't evolving, right? I think that's a big thing that's stagnant. And don't get me wrong that there are people in any profession that are stagnant, any profession. I don't care who you are. But there are great people in this field of education, especially in Ashwaubenon, where I'm at, where I can speak on personally, that are evolving and growing. We talked about Conrad. I just remember having a conversation with him, and he's been teaching for 25 years. As you guys know, just an elite teacher. But he told me, he's like, 3 or 4 years ago, I scrapped everything. I put it all in a bin, threw it out on the bonfire on a Saturday night, and, I started fresh. He's like, because, it helped me grow. It's stagnant for the kids. And it's something where if you're not, continuing to evolve and learning, well, then you're staying stale. So I think that hopefully we can change this notion of schools are just a stagnant place that they look like 100 years ago, because in my situation, they aren't.
All right. Well said. Well said. Bro, you going to say something?
No, I was saying, are there any more you want to kind of address that you feel like are, kind of things that kind of irk you, like, man, like if only people knew?
I think this idea of, and again, Joe Sanfilippo, one of my guys, says this all the time. He talks about the idea of you're just a teacher. And I hear that. And it's crazy. I hear it from some teachers. I hear it from people that are thinking about going into education, right? When I have conversations, I'm the high school basketball, help with high school basketball, and just talking to kids from other schools or even on the team. What do you want to do? And well, I'm thinking about being a teacher, but I don't know if I want to be just a teacher. Like you hear, like it's a thing you hear, just a teacher. And Sanfilippo, Joe talks about how moving the word just, right? So I'm a teacher just like Scott Conrad, just like so-and-so, right? I mean, when you change that word just, if we don't talk great about the work that we're doing, how we expect anyone else to? So I think it starts with the teachers. And there's so many teachers that are proud of the work they do, man. They're just so excited to share the great things about kids, and they have the same level of energy. But it's just changing where that word just goes. I'm not just a teacher. You change lives. You change freaking lives, people. So I think that's something that's really important to change, is just the verbiage of how we talk about education in general. No,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because teaching's just so much bigger. Like we said, that you can inspire so many kids, and I mean, it's one of the best jobs out there. I mean, just look at how you're talking about the profession. We can all understand that. Let's jump into some. You just got done with your first year on the job, right, as a teacher?
Yep.
So let's just jump into some of your favorite moments, your best experiences, anything you want to highlight or share.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind, I got 5. I got 5.
This is what I was waiting for, man. This is what I was waiting for.
Look at I re-grabbed the chair, sit back a little bit. So I got 5 points. Right? Yeah, got the water bottle, take a sip. But I got 5 lessons that I learned in my first year teaching, because, man, it's been a crazy one, obviously, with COVID. And just being with my students and then not being with them and trying to learn virtually, and just, no one's been through it. But these are my 5, and I got them listed off to the side here, so I'll do my best. But the first one is, it's not the behavior that's the problem. The behavior is the solution to the problem. So the behavior isn't the problem. The solution, it's the solution to their behavior that's really the problem. And I think it came when I was in, I remember walking into a math classroom, and I was kind of getting word that one of my boys was a little frustrated. And so I walked in there, and he, right when I walked in, he got handed back his test. So he's already a little on edge. And then they give the quiz, right? Quiz 4-3, coming back. And all of a sudden, you see it on the paper, whether it's a 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, he ain't feeling it, right? Yeah. So he starts ripping that sucker up, and you thought it would have been in December. It's snowing. You thought it would be Christmas time, boom, 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 boom. He's just throwing it all up in the air. And I kind of pulled him aside, and I talked to him, and I said, the first thing I said to him was that, hey, I'm happy you did that. And he looks at me and he's a little shook, right? He's like, well, why? I just disrupted the whole classroom. I ripped that whole thing up. I made a whole scene. And I said, because it shows you cares. And, there's so many people that have just given up. And I know if you didn't rip up that paper, if you aren't angry, if you aren't frustrated, you've given up. But I know we can work with something here because you still care. And he gave me this little smile, this little smirk that was like, man, you see it like I do care. And I just don't know how to show it yet. I don't know how to show it. Like, if you and I were to get frustrated, maybe we get quiet. Or maybe we have some different, maybe we meditate. Maybe we do, we do all these different things to help try to calm us down. He just didn't have those skills. And, talking to him more and more and more, I found out some stuff was going on at home. So it wasn't even the fact that he was getting a 3 or 4 out of 10. Obviously that frustrated him because he wants to succeed in school. Mm-hmm. But this idea that, the behavior isn't the problem. That's just their solution to what's really going on. So hearing him and just talking to him and getting to know what's going on at home, well, yeah, there was a bigger issue than getting a 4 out of 10. Mm. And then, so number 2, as I'm looking through here, when you have a relationship, the stronger the relationship you have with a student, the higher how do I put this? So the stronger the relationship you have with the student, the higher the expectations you can have for them. And this was a really eye-opening one for me too, because I'm a guy that likes to be liked. I do. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, with the kids. I want to build those strong relationships with them. And I think this was early on. What I was doing is I was working so hard to build relationships with some kids that weren't on the surface easy to build relationships with. And when I had that relationship, I think I would let them get away with some stuff, right? Just because I'm like, okay, I was kind of scared of that conflict. Even being the teacher, I'm like, okay, if I call him out, he or she for this, then we're going to take, the 5 months of us working hard to build this, it's just going to shatter. And I kind of was reading and heard that idea. And of course, the next day at school, I'm in class and a student is in there and we're taking a test and he starts yapping. And I'm like, come on, like, dude, people are worked hard for this. Can you just not right now? And he keeps going on. He's making a scene. I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave right now. Like, this is a big deal for some of these kids and you got to leave. So he blew up, man. He blew up. So he just gets up, take the chair, that's going. And he walks out of my classroom and he slams the door. And I'm not talking about he shut it. He made a scene. And for some reason, I'm like, I got to say something to him. I don't know why. Usually I would have let it go. I'm like, okay. But I went out in the hall and I'm like, come on, man. Who do you think you are? Like, you think this whole thing revolves around? And it was the first time I really had that conflict with a student. And we went back and forth a little bit, and I ended up kind of calming down. He ended up calming down. But after we left that, he went storming off, and I'm like, holy smokes. Well, 6 months of building that relationship, and now we're starting ground zero tomorrow. It's going to be, hey, what's your name? What's your favorite color? Because we are donezo. And what was really interesting, though, is at the end of the day, he came up to me, and he's spinning the football around. He goes, hey, Mr. Imig, you mind if we play catch after school? And it hit me. It was like we had that massive blow up, right? We were, Mr. Imig, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. You're the worst teacher in the school. And then 5 hours later, he's coming back. He's like, hey, can we throw it around? And again, that was his way of saying, hey, I kind of messed up. I apologize for kind of, saying, who do you think you are, right? I mean, I got after him a little bit, but it was just that idea of when you have a strong relationship with a kid, you can hold them to higher expectations than really anyone because they don't want to let you down. They don't want to let you down. And when you have that trust and that rapport, kids will rise to the occasion. That bar that you set, they will match it many times. So we got that. That was number 2. Man, it's not, I like number 3 too. It's not the space that matters. It's the people in the space that matter. And that one hit me literally as I was cleaning out my room, and I'm sitting there and I'm taking down the posters and, because they're going to clean everything down because of COVID and get the room all fresh and pretty for next year. And I just remember, wow, I didn't get that chance to, formally say goodbye in person to all my kids. It was just really kind of weighing on me a little bit. And as I was leaving the classroom, I turned around and I just looked at the classroom, and it just hit me. And it just hit me that, wow, like none of this classroom really means anything without the kids in it. And I just remember on the first day of school, just being so just jacked up to get the poster, right? You can do it. You give 110%, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Michael Jordan, you get that poster just sitting there right and perfect, move it 10 times, get the walls, just exactly how you want it. But none of that, it helps, but that the room isn't what's special. The place isn't what's special. It's the people in the place. And I think that's just so much of a life thing as well. We're heading up to my cabin this weekend, and my cabin is a great place, but it means nothing without the great people. And I mean, you could move us to a little shack somewhere, and we'd all be happy, right? Because it's the people. And I think that one really opened my eyes that it's not the space, man. It's the people, and it's the kids that really had that impact on me that made it tough to say goodbye.
I love that, man. No, that's great.
And then, I would say number 4 is, let me grab my phone real quick. I have it written down here for you. It's escaping my head, but oh yeah, here we go. This is kind of what we were talking about before, but it's deep down, every kid craves a champion to root for and care for them. And, going back to the student that slammed the door, he didn't know how to show his emotions, but deep down, I think he kind of wanted me to say something, right? Like if he would, I would just let him go. I think that you hear that coaches, or teachers say, when I stop getting on you, it means I don't care. And I think there's some truth to that, right? I think when you really care about someone, you're always in that dialogue. You're trying to make them better, but it starts with that relationship. But going back to that one, there was this kid, and this is where the quarantine comes into play. There was a student that was just completely off the radar, Tried texting grandma. Grandma gave me his phone number, so I text him. He'd text me back and then leave me on red for 2 weeks. I'm like, what are you, the girls I'm texting? I mean, seriously. I mean, I thought only the girls did this. So now all of a sudden I'm getting ghosted by a 7th grader. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. I'm like, I'm done. Forget about this. So, anyways, I'm just like, you know what? I gotta go, and I got to go and just see what's going on, make sure the kid's okay. So I went over and I knocked on his door, and grandma came out. And again, this is at like 4 p.m. And grandma comes out and she's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, hey, I'm one of Xander's teachers. And she's like, oh no, what did he do? And I'm like, no. I don't even want to talk about the fact that he hasn't done one thing in 3 weeks, but I want to just see how he's doing. And she's like, well, he's actually sleeping right now. I did this. I did the old double check, 4 o'clock. We're not talking 4 a.m. And I'm like, well, trying to be really nice. Can you maybe get him up for me and say hi? And she's like, okay, I'll go get him. So he comes out and we just have a talk. And again, he's kind of expecting me to harp on him about how he hasn't done anything. But it really hit me. And again, going back to every kid deep down craves someone to be a champion and really root and care about him. And this was one of my favorite moments of the year. As we sat down, and I really just tried to listen, right? We talked about that before, about how I'm quite the talker, but I really tried to just listen. And he talked about how he was staying up till 5 a.m. and not getting up until about 4 p.m. Right? So his schedule was just completely wonked. And I said, well, why are you leaving me on red? Why are you texting me back? I'm just trying to help. And he's like, well, I didn't want to make excuses up because I didn't think, people would believe me that that's the kind of the schedule that I'm on. So I didn't want to respond 5 hours later. He's like, it just didn't feel right. I didn't feel comfortable. So I said, okay. I said, well, perfect. So you're saying you wake up at 4 p.m. and you go to bed at 5 a.m. or whatever the case may be. And I said, perfect. Well, what time's when are you feeling most awake? Because I'm sure if you're waking up at 4 p.m., you got a little grogginess or a little, he's like 10 p.m. And I said, perfect. I'll see you online at 10 p.m. He kind of gave me the look like, you kidding me? I said, no, man. We health is a credit that you can get for high school, and we're doing it. So I'll see you online at 10 p.m. And I left that, and I was kind of scratching my head. I'm like, what the heck did I just do? I'm like, no way this kid shows up. So I text him at 9:45, and I'm like, hey, I'm ready. I'll send you the link. And he responds with, okay. And all of a sudden, 10 p.m. and we're online just like this. And we went through the whole health assignment and he killed it, rocked it. I mean, he's reading and I'm hooting and hollering, as you can imagine. We're just having a ball, and I'm waking up my family because I'm talking just like this, and it's 10:45 at night. But what's crazy is he came back on multiple times and he ended up passing health. He had 0 assignments done, and we had to get 6, 7, 8 assignments done. And he came on every time, 10 p.m., boom, crank through it. And again, it was just so cool to see. And I don't say it for anything about me, because he was the one doing the assignment. He just needed me there to support him. Mm-hmm. He was reading it, answering the questions, kind of was a little insecure about his answers sometimes, but I'm like, man, you're killing it. Like, keep just doing what you're doing. And I'm just here and I'm kind of just staying in the background. But it was really cool to see, because I think, again, he just wanted, and so many teachers were trying to reach out to him. And then finally, when one of us got to him, I think he just craved that, right? Because it wasn't like he wanted to fail. He didn't want to fail. He just didn't know how to succeed. It was online. It was, he didn't have his sleep schedule figured out, right? I mean, he had a lot of stuff going on at home. And it was great that we could get him on a schedule a little bit, even though if it was at 10 p.m. And, it just goes back to, I think everyone wants to do well. I think that's a really, a common misconception in a lot of areas of life. I think a lot of times people think that people just kind of want to, are okay with being content and being lazy. And I just think you just end up there. I don't think that we wake up someday and be like, oh, I want to be an average teacher, or I want to be an average podcast host, or no, I mean, you just end up there. You don't want to be that. Everyone wants to give value. Everyone wants to be great. And I'm just excited for that kid, because he passed health, and hopefully he gets a little momentum going into next year.
That's awesome, man. Can I just stop you there really quick?
Yeah.
So just taking that extra step and making that impact, I think it doesn't matter how early that happens to in your life, or like when it happened, what grade you're in, but just having that connection, having that interaction, I feel like that lasts like a lifetime. Because, well, in 4th grade, I had a teacher, Mr. Averbeck. And
yeah.
Shout out Mr. Averbeck if you're watching this.
He'll be watching it.
Yeah, I remember that class vividly. That's the grade where I, in elementary school, that's the grade I remember the most of, because he just made, his classroom was like a non-traditional classroom. He had a basketball hoop on the side. He made games and stuff, with prizes, and he made everything fun for us. Like you said, everyone wants to succeed. Everyone wants to be successful. People don't know how to be successful. So creating those different avenues and showing us that, it can be fun, right? I think a lot of times it feels like people make that it's a chore to be successful. Oh, you got to get
right.
turned in, that assignment turned in, you got to get this grade. You don't do that, you're going to be a failure in life. Right. It's just like, what? Man, it's not fun at all. Like, it can be fun. I think that's an important message. And I think, man, you're really getting that across.
Well, think about it. I mean, when you think of the idea of learning, right? When you think of just the word learning, I would bet if you surveyed a bunch of people would say learning is a negative. It's got a negative feel to it. And I'm not going to lie. Like, I felt that throughout school as well. I love school, not because I like caring about, like learning about slope. I mean, I really didn't care. X and Y intercept. I don't care. But I just care about the interaction and, the friendships and the relationships that are being built from it. And I just think that, once I started learning what I want to learn, and that's why I love what you guys are doing with this podcast, right? Because you guys are giving that platform to people to just kind of get the light bulb going of what could I be? Yeah. What could I be? Because, as soon as I figured out, okay, education's the route I want to go, I've just went all in. I've read so many books, and now all of a sudden I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm doing whatever it takes. And learning is just great. I read books now. I don't want to even tell you how many books I read in middle school and high school, because all the teachers would be like, that's not possible. You got an A in my class. But I seriously.
Spark Notes.
Yeah, Spark Notes. Exactly. I mean, my goodness, Spark Notes was the tab I came on there. I mean, that was number one. But yeah, I think when you find something you like to do, or just when you want to learn what you want to learn, and I think a lot of teachers are doing a great job of that, of giving choice. I see that all the time in our school, whether it's reading books, people are doing projects on either the environment, social issues, and they had choice. And when you give kids choice, you see the buy-in. And I think that's where school is going towards too. Just like what you guys were saying is that Mr. Everbeck did a good job of creating that and fostering that environment to make you feel like learning wasn't a chore. I like that. I'm going to steal that. I'm stealing that.
Just trademark it, man.
Yeah, exactly. Learning is not a chore. Check your Twitter right now. Boom, 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 live tweet.
And I just noticed, like, talking to you now, like the extra step that you take for the students, like at least me growing up, I mean, I just never remembered hearing about a teacher actually going to check in on a student personally at their house, So I think that extra step you're taking is really revolutionizing the profession. And, that's great. I think you should keep that up.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Changing the teaching game, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope. And then, you know what the thing is there's, there's so many teachers that are doing this, and I'm just really loud about it, and you guys follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and I'm shouting it out, but and there's going to be people that obviously think, okay, he's doing this because, he gets some attention from it. But honestly, I'm doing it to change the narrative. To change the narrative of school, because there's so many other teachers that I know that are doing the exact same things that I'm talking to you about, but they just don't share it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because a lot of people don't want the attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the reason why I'm doing it, the reason why I'm trying to be so loud is because changing the stereotypes of education, changing the narrative, there are teachers that do these things for kids that they're not even their own kid. And they're doing these things, and they're changing their lives, and they're changing the trajectory of their lives. And again, there's something that I read the book Atomic Habits, and it was really good. It was talking about habit changes and how a few degree shift can be so impactful, right? And it got me thinking. They talked about how if you're in New York City and you're taking off to Washington, D.C., and you're sitting in a plane. Okay. And the pilot shifts the plane 2 degrees, right? You end up in a completely different place. Like, so here, what was, I got it wrong. So you're in California, right? You're in LA, and you're headed for New York, and the pilot shifts the plane 2 degrees, and you end up in Washington, D.C. It's a 1 or 2 degree shift, and you can't even feel like it's noticeable, but that's how the kind of approach I'm trying to take, right? Showing up to a baseball game. Okay. It's a 1 degree shift. It really is. It really isn't that big of a deal. But could that change the trajectory of something? You just never know. You never know what the kid is going to remember. You never know. You never know whether it's just stopping by on your way home and just seeing a kid outside and playing catch with them for 2 minutes. Like, that could be the story that they tell the rest of their life. Yeah. You just never know. So those 1-2 degree shifts could just completely change the trajectory, and that's what I'm hoping to do.
Speaking of shifts you had to make in your first year teaching, what shift did you have to take when we moved virtually to a virtual platform? Yeah,
that was interesting. I think the one of the biggest barriers was that teachers were used to getting up at 7:30, 8 in the morning, and we're like online. We're like, let's help some kids today. Let's get on the Zoom call and making some content. And then I'll text like a kid's mom like, hey, we had a planned meeting at 9. Like, well, she doesn't get up till 1. So the kids weren't getting up till 11, 12, 1 p.m. So it was really hard, right? So I think that we learned so much from that experience. We're going to keep the good, and some things that didn't work out, we're going to try to change and adjust. But getting people on the same schedule was a challenge. It really was, because, and then my role in this was really trying to help students, one, make sure that they're doing okay at home. I think that it was so important to just ask the questions, how are you doing? Right? Like, academics are so important. And I was trying to hold them to the high standard, because I didn't want them on a 6-month vacation. But you can't learn if things aren't going well at home. So I always ask, how are you feeling? And is there anything I can do for you or your family? And those were always what I led with, because, I mean, to me, that's just way more important. It just is. Now, once we answered those questions, if they were good, I ain't letting you skimp off, right? I'm not letting you ride out. I had a Zoom call with one of my kids, and FaceTime or whatever it is, and he's sitting back 2 p.m. He's got Fortnite on, he's drinking a Coke, and I'm like, dude, like, get out of your pajamas, you got to roll. I mean, you're just bumming all day. And so, the virtual was tough. It was, but I think a positive that came out of it, because as you see, you know, I'm always looking for the positive.
Love it, man. Love it.
Is I really connected with families more. I think going into my first year teaching, I wanted to keep that at the forefront, but I didn't do a good job of it. I'm going to be honest. I got kind of overwhelmed and bombarded with just everything a first year teacher has to adjust to and learn, that I kind of put that off. I was focused on the relationship with the kids, but the families kind of were on the back burner. But when this kind of came, I was given a little more time to just to think and make those relationships with the families the priority. So I was reaching out to parents. I had multiple calls with people. And it was interesting is when I took the time to do that, I found out something that was pretty interesting, because there was kids that you'd email, right? You'd email home like so-and-so's having a rough day or blah, blah, blah. And they'd never get back to you. Or even you'd share out, I try to share out a highlight, like so-and-so killed it today. They were helping another person out. They were showing them how to do, you know, multiplying fractions. And then you never hear back. So you just think, well, oh, they're classic. They don't have parents that don't care. And then you actually get a hold of them and you start talking to them. And man, that's their kid. Yeah. I think we kind of forget that sometimes, that like, that's their most prized possession. They care. And you know what? Maybe if they're not showing it, maybe we talk about skills. Maybe they don't have the communication skills, right? To have those conversations. Maybe they don't have, maybe that's what their parents were doing the same thing, right? And maybe not coming to, I got to share this, because this is something too. It got me going. My ADD is kicking in, right? It's a boom, 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 boom.
No, it is good.
And it was conferences. Okay. So I'm completely pivoting. Hopefully you don't cut this part out.
No, no, dude, go for it, man.
We're completely pivoting, but it was conference time, and I was just all ready. You know, I got my suit on. You know, I'm trying to all the teachers like, what are you doing? I mean, you ain't winning no golden apple. Like, you know, this is conferences. Everyone's got to do it. So I'm sitting there and I'm feeling good, and you know, we have like an 8-hour time slot. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. You know, not a lot of people signed up for mine, you know, but I'm like, oh, I'm sure they'll be here. And no one came the first day.
Oh, man.
I'm sitting. I'm seriously, guys, 8 hours. Now, I'm like, holy smokes. Now, I had been in contact with some of the parents of the kids, like, hey, we can't make it. That's totally fine. Or like, hey, you know, we're out of town. No big deal. But I'm talking, not one person made it the first day. So now the second day comes, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'll lose the sports coat. Okay, maybe, you know, maybe I'll lose. I was sweating all day, you know, getting ready. And I had on my sheet, because they could sign up virtually, and I had one person sign up, and they come walking in the last 15 minutes, and it wasn't even a kid in my class. It wasn't even a kid in my class. It was a kid that was in my homeroom. They're like, hey, I accidentally signed up for you. I'm like, stay and talk. Stay and talk. But a lot of the kids, you know, I didn't mention this earlier, but a lot of the kids that I work with, you know, I would say that I'm a huge basically my role is just to support them either academically, behaviorally, socially, and everyone's different, right? Mm-hmm. So when they kind of throw the term at risk out there, but it's not that I have kids that would never get in trouble at all, but maybe they just need a little push and guidance. And I got talent, and I'm going to be honest with you, that word, that idea of, you know, people needing help is, I got talented kids in my class. I got, you know, your school doesn't always fit everyone's skill set. You guys know that. Yeah. And I got kids that are going to change the world, man. They got personalities like you wouldn't be. They're leaders. They're leaders. They can impact. I mean, you see what they'll do. I mean, if they throw a chicken nugget at lunch, everyone's throwing chicken nuggets. I mean, people follow them. Yeah. People follow them. So I think that, but going back to that, the point about conferences is that it was a lot of those kids and a lot of those parents, I think, had poor experiences in school. So when all of a sudden, you know, I had a rough experience, or even if I've been having conferences with my kid for 8 years, and every single one has been, you know, Susie didn't do this, Jim didn't do this, Lamar didn't do this, he's failing here, he's below proficient here. Why do you want to go?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be new?
Yeah.
I mean, everything is negative. And again, you know, and not saying teachers are trying to do this, and some of it's just plain facts, right? Like, you have to, when you go there, you go through the reading score, and it's like, okay, like, you're reading at a third grade level. Like there's no way to say it around it. But I think it's just so demoralizing sometimes that they just end up don't showing up. So come back, fast forward, I'm rethinking, how can I get these families here? And so basically in the spring, I held conferences at the bowling alley. So not very traditional. I kind of went off the grid. I'm like, we going bowling? I have 40 kids that are kind of that I consider my crew. And I think about 20 of them showed up. So from zero to 20. That first time around was just incredible. But it changed it lightened the intenseness, right, of a parent-teacher conference. And I had some great conversations at the bowling alley. So I think I'm going to continue to do that. But it's just like, I just hope that these kids begin to see themselves in a different light. And because a lot of them have a lot of great gifts to share.
Yeah, I think that goes back to, building relationships, not only with the student, but with their families. Because as you saw, that made a big impact. It was exponential right there, going from 0 to 20.
Yeah, 0 to 20, man.
Well, right. And I think that's just so important, the relationship with the parents, because they're at school for a good chunk of time, right? They're at school for, 8 hours a day, but what happens after? So if you can build that rapport and that relationship with the parents, you're moving the needle a lot more. And obviously they're around their family a lot. So I think if we're all on the same page, that we can really change the narrative of school and really help, the kids out.
Nice. Man, yeah, this is really thought-provoking stuff. I've gotten a whole different perspective at it. And I've been reading your Facebook posts and stuff and seeing your videos and things, but like just hearing it from you, I just feel that genuine vibe and passion. I love that, man. Like I appreciate you doing that. And that's exactly like I said. I'll say it again. Like you're the first person that came to my mind when I was like, who should we get for a teacher? And it was Jake. Like that's what came to my mind right away. I didn't think twice about it. So that's awesome. And just to use that as a transition, let's go into our last segment. And this is something I feel like I kind of want to keep this consistent with everyone we have on. I want you to give your advice to say you're talking to your class and just telling them like, you can go pursue whatever you want. How would you go about telling them that? Letting them know that they don't have to feel pressure. There's not one set path for them, or they don't have to just buckle under that peer pressure, but they can really pursue and be successful at whatever they're passionate about. What would you give advice for that for?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this the other day when you messaged me this, kind of that we'd maybe be wrapping up with this. And I got thinking about the amount of time you spend working and the amount of time you spend sleeping. Okay. So you're like, what? And if you work 40 hours a week for 52 weeks, it's like 2,080 hours. I don't know. Don't math check me on that. But it ends up to being about, what do I got written down? 87 days. Okay. So in a year, you'll spend 87 days working if you're only working 40 hours a week. And then if you're sleeping 7 hours a night, in a year, that adds up to 106 days. So 193 days of the year, you're either sleeping or you're working. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was so important to me. And what I would tell people is try to find something you enjoy. And it's not easy, right? And it's the earlier you can have that mindset, the easier it is to maybe find that, because you talk to people that are set in a career that maybe have a family, that it's not as easy to make that change and that pivot. But I would tell kids growing up is find something that you're passionate about. Find something that doesn't feel like work, right? We talked about learning maybe feeling like work, but if it doesn't feel like work, I think you're onto something. And to be really successful at anything, you got to have a drive for it. You really do, because to get to the top of the mountain, you got to be willing to put in the work. And I think that if you're spending more than half your time of a year, you're either sleeping or you're working, I hope you choose to do something that you maybe enjoy or that can give you the opportunity to make an impact on people. So, think about that, and hopefully the kids and whoever's watching this chooses something that interests them, and they really follow their heart with it.
Man, that's a perfect way to just
put
it.
No, that's awesome, man. And I think with that, let's conclude the session. I want to thank you again. Thanks for coming on, Jake. I'm sure a lot of people are going to love this, man. Just It was a really interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I appreciate you guys.
yeah, we'll be getting this out soon, and hopefully this series, I just hope people can benefit from it. Get different perspectives and learn a lot from it. And it's all starting off with you, man. So,
but no, I just really want to thank you guys. I think what you guys are doing is incredible, right? Just giving the platform to kids, and then just the fact of thinking about me and thinking about the field of education, right? Because we talk about it's just the teacher. So for you guys to think about that and put teaching and education as the #1 show, it means a lot to me. And so many kids will be impacted by this. There's no doubt about it. I know you guys are going big, and I know you guys will do great things. So I'm happy, and I'm blessed to be the #1, even if it didn't make sense. But, hey, I'm blessed to be #1, and I can't wait to see where you guys go with this, and you guys know I'll always be supporting you.
Yeah, thanks, man. We're really happy to have you. And feel free to send this to all your peers, your teachers you work with, your students. Let's get the word out, and let's inspire people.
Absolutely, you guys.
Thanks
you.
a lot, man.
All right. Thanks, Jake. We'll see you.
Peace.